Welcome everyone! Today you'll get nothing short of an attacking masterclass by Alexei Shirov. It's gonna be a lot of fun and it also has a great example of a classic sacrifice. So let's jump right in. This is from the Wijk aan Zee Super Tournament from 1999. He played Dimitri Reinderman. Shirov had white and opened with e4, c5, so we have a Sicilian, knight f3, knight c6, and now knight to c3 by Shirov, and the point of this move order is to avoid certain lines for black. If, for example, white would go d4, and they would trade on d4, then black could go for a Sveshnikov after knight f6, knight c3, and e5. However, if black would go knight to f6 here, hoping to still get into the Sveshnikov after a trade on d4 and e5, then white can instead play bishop to b5 and we've entered a variation of the Rossolimo. Going back, Shirov went knight to c3, and after e6 they entered an open Sicilian anyway, and with a6 we'll be heading into the Taimanov variation. Black rules out any knight to b5 or bishop to b5 move, but it also delays moving the d-pawn, and so black keeps the option open to develop the dark squared bishop to an active square. Then bishop e2 and knight from g to e7. Now black's planning to take on d4 and immediately attack white's queen with knight to c6, which isn't a bad plan, but it does mean black's king side won't be defended as much. After f4, black did trade and played b5, planning bishop to b7 and hoping to one day kick white's knight and take on e4. White castled, queen c7, and after queen to f2 we see another reason for white playing f2, f4. White wants to use f2 for the queen, where it could support f4, f5 one day. Black now does finally bring the knight to c6 in order to develop the bishop on f8. If we briefly go back here, black delayed going knight to c6 and went b5 instead, because he was hoping white would go bishop to e3 in order to then hit the queen with knight to c6, and now the queen cannot go to the desirable f2 square. In the game, white played queen to f2 voluntarily, and so black doesn't really have a better move than move the knight to c6 now anyway. Now white does play bishop to e3, bishop e7, and here a4 by Shirov. b5 is now hanging, so b4, which ends up helping white. After knight to b1, the knight could one day go to c4 or f3, but bishop to d3 is now also possible because black cannot go knight to b4 anymore to kick the bishop. Rook to b8 was played, that stops white from going bishop to b6. Knight d2, castles, bishop to d3. One day white wants to go e5 and attack black's king, therefore d6, stopping e5. Rook from a to d1, but here black plays an ambitious move that doesn't really work out. He tried b3. Maybe black can still make an improving move first, like rook to d8. Now d5 could even be considered. If let's say knight to f3, then d5 is a strong move, because while white does get to play e5, black can advance again with d4, and that pawn is not hanging. If white would take, then he's just losing. First there's a recapture, but then rook takes d4 is a killer move, because the rook cannot be taken because of this deadly pin. Going back to the game, black went for b3, hoping to put pressure on white's queen side, but watch what happens. Shirov first takes with the pawn, bishop f6. That was another reason black wanted to stop e4, e5. Now the bishop has this nice diagonal, but Shirov found the right move. He went rook to c1, so he offers the pawn back, and he does that to remove one of black's defenders from the king side, and you'll soon see how effective that is. The bishop went to a3. Black has to keep defending c1. If the bishop had gone back, then white would play rook from f to c1, piling up on the pinned knight. Bishop to b7 defends, but then white has a number of strong moves. The simplest is probably bishop takes pawn, which removes the defender, and after rook takes knight, white is winning. That's why bishop to a3 was played, but now we'll see the start of another great attack by Shirov. First e5, that of course opens up the diagonal for the light squared bishop, but there's more going on. If allowed, white would take on d6 and could also follow up with bishop to e4, attacking the knight, and knight to c4 is a threat as well. Therefore black went d5, but knight to f3 is very unpleasant. White could again attack the pinned knight with knight to d4, but we can also imagine a classic Greek gift sacrifice on h7. Actually, maybe the best black could do was go for the counterplay he was planning to go for with rook takes b3. White would still get this classic attack on the king side, but after rook to e8, white first needs to take a timeout to save the bishop, and after queen b7 planning rook to b1, yes, white still gets the queen check in, but the king will go to e7 and black's planning rook to b1. Granted, black's still in big trouble, but it doesn't look like white's winning easily here. However, in the game, Reinderman played queen d7, stepping out of the pin, but now Shirov gets the same attack and black doesn't have any counterplay. Once again, bishop takes h7 check was played, the classic Greek gift sacrifice. Black has nothing better than taking that, queen check, king g8, knight to g5. There's a mate threat, so rook to e8. And now the standard way to continue would be queen check, king f8, another check, and take on g7. But now the king may hide on d8. Black's still a lot worse, but Shirov found a better way to attack. Shirov instead played rook to f3. He doesn't want to chase black's king to a safer square. He simply wants to go rook to h3 and mate on h8. Now the king cannot even run to f8 anymore if he wanted to. If king to f8, then a knight check. King g8 is the only move, and now knight f6 check already forks king and queen. But if black takes, then it's even worse. White would first check with the rook, and after king to f8, pawn takes, and next the queen has two checkmate squares to choose from. So black didn't run with the king, knight e7 was played instead, hoping to play knight to g6 and guard h8, but now queen check, king to f8 and queen h8 check, and now Shirov managed to get his queen to h8 while the black king is still stuck on f8, and here he rightly chose to stir up more trouble before the king can try to escape with f5. And this move also plans a breakthrough that'll activate both the rook on f3 as well as the bishop. Black cannot allow white to take on e6, so pawn takes. But here's the real breakthrough. e6 is simply an excellent move, opening up more lines to the black king. Black has to take, and after rook to g3, already we can see a benefit of opening up the 7th rank. Now white's planning a knight check on h7 and then rook takes g7 check, which at the very least will win the queen. g6 was tried, but unsurprisingly black is still completely lost. The knight check was played anyway. King to f7. Going to e7 isn't better. White would win with simple moves. First bishop g5 check, and after king to d6 another check. If the king goes back, then queen g7 check wins, and if e5, then there's rook takes g6 check, and black will be mated very soon. Going back, Reinderman went king to f7, but bishop to h6 is a very pretty move. Remember, thanks to that f5 move, the bishop got back into the game. The threat is now mate in 1, so king to e7. Taking the bishop wouldn't help, that would end quickly after queen check, king g8, and rook takes pawn check, and it's mate next move. Therefore, king to e7, now again bishop check, king d6 would lead to the variation we looked at, so king f7, bishop to f6, again mate is threatened, rook f8 gives the king an escape square, but now a really nice move by Shirov, rook to c7. Black was already lost, but now it's really looking desperate. The queen can't escape because it's pinned to the king. If therefore queen takes rook, then queen check, and black drops the queen. The rook is hanging as well, white is easily winning. So instead black decided to take on f6, but really this doesn't change anything. queen takes knight check, king e8, queen g6 check, then the queen dropped with check, then Shirov also won a rook for the knight. Black could have resigned a while ago, but it continued a bit longer. Queen f6 check, the bishop blocked, rook check, king c7, but after queen c3 check, a rook trade, and h4, black had finally seen enough and resigned. The bishop can't take because queen h8 or queen b4 check would win the bishop, but of course if the pawn does advance, it'll simply be too easy to win. Really fine game by an underappreciated attacking legend. Let's check out some key positions. Black started to go badly wrong with this b3 move, and the big issue with this was that after pawn takes and bishop f6, black's dark square bishop ended up really far away from the defense of the black king, and e5 really underlined how weak black's king had become. Soon after this, Shirov seized his chance and played this classic Greek gift sacrifice. Then he cleverly also involved the rook into the attack, ensuring that the black king wouldn't run away to the queen side. But the move that really sealed the deal for Shirov was this great pawn break with f5 and e6, and really from this point on, for someone of Shirov's caliber, it was simply a trivial win. Again, very fine game and super instructive. There are many more games in the playlist, including a number of great Shirov games, so feel free to check those out. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. There'll be more great chess next weekend, so I'll be seeing you guys again soon, and take care.